Napoli fans around the world, welcome to Napoli Talk. The transfer market is finally over, and what a disappointing market it has been, with Kvara leaving and us not being able to replace him with our A, B, C, or maybe even F target, with Garnacho, Adeyemi, Amuzzo, all these names, San Maximan, all these names coming up, and then finally settling for Okafor. Now, Napoli called a press conference today with their sporting director, Giovanni Manna. And look, before we get into what he says, I just want to give my take on the situation in general regarding this press conference. So, number one, I'm happy that it's the sporting director that is doing the talking regarding the transfers. Before, in other years, we either didn't address things, or it was De Laurentiis or the coach would get bombarded with questions. Now it finally feels like we have a bit of structure. The coach answers questions about the field, sporting director needs to answer questions about the mercato, and De Laurentiis needs to either not say anything or just answer questions regarding the stadium, the training center, big strategy kind of things, and not get into the details of individual transfers and the transfer market in general. I also like the transparency of Giovanni Manna, who admitted a lot of issues that we faced, a lot of areas for improvement. What I will say though is that it does come across at times like he's a little bit inexperienced, and we potentially come across as not a strong club, because he admitted how a lot of situations occurred where we just had to sort of accept them, that players had the upper hand or other clubs had the upper hand on us in the various negotiations, or that maybe we weren't so prepared for certain scenarios. So that I didn't like, and I didn't like when he talked about the objectives, but we'll get into that as well. So just to recap very briefly on what he said, I don't want to go over the entire press conference. First of all, he talked about Kvara and how the club was almost forced to sell him because of Kvara's, quote, almost blackmail towards the club. He didn't go into details about what that is, but it's not a great look when the club is forced into something that they don't want to do. Again, not necessarily Manna's fault because he arrived late in the whole Kvara saga, but not a great look for the club, that we were basically doing something in which we were not in full control over. I think we've learned our lesson, or it seems like we might have learned our lesson, because when asked about how we can avoid the situation in the future, Manna did mention that we need to renew players that are at the center of the project much earlier and make them feel like they're at the center of the project. And that's why he also talked about guys like Oliveira, Anguissa, Meret getting renewals or being in the process of getting renewals very soon. So good that we are addressing this situation, but bad that he used those kind of terms, that we were almost blackmailed into doing something. First of all, it's not a great look for how you speak about a player that you had in your own team, but also you don't want to give any kind of indication to other players that they can do something similar to you. Now, he also talked about some of the transfers that we tried to accomplish coming in, and he said that we are not happy with the situation that we are in. We tried to get Garnacho, it didn't work. His salary expectations were maybe not in line with what we wanted, also because it would have been unfair for the people that were already at the club. There was the issue with Manchester United on the fee itself. Adeyemi, he said he went all the way to Dortmund, but the player was not convinced. Saint-Maximin, there was bureaucratic issues. Anyways, a lot of different issues. And what was clear with the whole left wing situation is that we were caught unprepared. And I do not understand that, because it was very clear with the people at the club that Kvara was not going to renew weeks before the transfer window opened. So we had all the time in the world, I think, to first of all try to get an agreement with Garnacho even before Kvara left, and if not, then you already move on to other targets much sooner. But it seemed like we finally moved on to other targets only in the final few days of the Mercato, and it was a disaster. And Manna agrees that we should have prioritized things differently, that, you know, some of these other people that we tried to negotiate for, such as Saint-Maximin and all that, we should have really had those agreements in the bag in parallel while we were trying to get Garnacho, because then if that fails, then the final few days of the Mercato are more relaxed, are just, okay, yes, let's sign and let's do it, instead of doing the actual negotiating in the final days. But again, it's something that he acknowledges, something that I hope we can address in the next winter transfer market. In the summer transfer market, it's different, right? You have 3 months, you have a lot more time. The clubs are much more willing to sell when it's not in the middle of the year. So I think he did a very good job in the summer, but the tight deadlines of the winter really caught him off guard, and he was happy to admit that. Now, he also mentioned that he's disappointed that the whole Comuzzo thing was very public and that Danilo was not able to come, also because he had promised Rafa Marin that he would be going to Villarreal to get playing time. Now, that didn't come across very well to me. Number one, you just admitted that you made a promise to a player and you couldn't keep it, right? You told Rafa Marin that he was going to go to Villarreal, get playing time, that someone was going to come to fill in his gap. And now you have a player in Rafa Marin that is upset. You've set a precedent where you promised someone something and you didn't go ahead with it. So the club doesn't come out looking great there. Then with the whole fact that Danilo was almost certain and you still then lost out, again, he doesn't come out great, Manna, here, because he should be he should be putting himself in a position where he has all the ducks lined up before things get so public. And before spending so many days, or while spending so many days on a specific player, you should have other alternatives ready just in case. The Comuzzo thing as well was a bit too last minute, with Fiorentina putting a very high wall. The news spread very quickly. He wasn't able to control the narrative. Overall, guys, the entire way that the Mercato was run was not great, right? There was a lot of leaks, a lot of running around, chasing after clubs and players. I think we need to work on that a little bit more. But very good that at least Manna has recognized the mistakes. Another thing he talked about, however, was the objectives of the club. And he wants to remind people that the objective is top 4. It's the Champions League. And he said a phrase that if you fly too high, then the fall can be too great, which I didn't like at all, right? Because it shows almost fear in reaching that level and sustaining a certain level, almost as if we arrived here too quickly, that Conte almost penalized the club by winning so many games, that the expectations now are so high that if we don't now deliver on those promises, that it's going to be a disaster. Or now we have to deliver guys to the level of Garnacho and so on, because now the club, the fans, sorry, do not accept someone like Okafor. I couldn't agree less with Manna. I think, look, as the sporting director, you have to think that not only the fans and journalists are listening to you, but other players as well. And other players want to listen to a sporting director say that the objective is not just the Champions League, but it's the Scudetto, because that's how you can attract top talent. And I think there's nothing wrong with actually saying, look, our objective is the Scudetto, especially for this year. I mean, look, who are we trying to fool? The objective is the Scudetto. I think we've got a group of players that have proven that they can go out and win games. It's going to be challenging to keep up with Inter, to actually get through with it, but I trust the players. Send a bit more of a motivational speech and say, look, moving forward, that is also something that we aim to do, just with our way. We don't want to overpay players. We don't want to give them salaries that are out of our parameters. We don't want to give agents huge commissions. We want to identify players like we did this summer, good players, strong players that want to be at Napoli. And we're confident that with the ones that we already have and the coach that we have and these players that we know that we can get, that this is a club that can actually fight for titles. I don't know why we can't, as a club, frame it like that. Frame it that you can win sustainably, that you can win with our approach. Why? Because we've done it before. And we're kind of in the process of doing it again. It might not happen, but it's very clear that we're on the right path. So why do we have to hide and say, no, let's put the expectations down? I mean, who are you trying to fool here? So, look, this press conference overall, guys, leaves me conflicted. Again, on the one hand, I'm happy that it happened. I'm happy that the sporting director came out to speak, that he explained the intricacies of some of the negotiations, that he was transparent. But on the other hand, I feel like we sent the message that we are not in full control of the situation, both internally with some of the players and also when we go and do our external negotiations with other players and clubs, that we're taken by surprise by certain situations, that we're not fully prepared and we didn't fully plan this through. And the whole objectives thing leaves me questioning, why we have to have such a negative mindset, why we can't try to convince people that this is an approach that could actually lead to something. And I think that if we were to frame it that way, it would really help also Manna himself, because I think you can attract players a lot easier that way if you sell them the dream. But guys, overall, I think Manna has a lot of improvement, a lot of scope for improvement, let's say, in terms of how he delivers some messages. But overall, quite happy that at least we got something out of the club. Now, look, in terms of the individual players, Garnacho, Cafor, all this, if you guys want me to make some kind of analysis on that, drop a comment in the section. What I will say is that Garnacho was not Jesus. Okafor is not the worst player ever. I think he is, number one, a body that Conte can use for training sessions, which is also very useful. And two, once he gets back into fitness, I think he is an option. I mean, it's definitely a step down from Kvara, but at least it's a step up from Zerbin. right? So he's that sort of in-between level where, yeah, let's not expect too much, but maybe 1 or 2 goals, 1 or 2 assists, and they might be important, could come our way thanks to him. It's not what we wanted. I'm very disappointed in the Mercato, but now that it's over, I think to the individual player, we need to show trust, we need to give him the support, and we need to focus our frustration more towards the club rather than towards the player, because he's got absolutely no fault in all of this. Anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you appreciate that I cannot do a 45-minute translation of exactly word for word what Manna said. I'm sure you'll find the transcript somewhere, but I want to just provide my opinion on his words, and drop a comment down below on what you think were some of the key takeaways from that conference and of this Mercato session. Anyways, guys, have a good one, and Forza Napoli sempre. Ciao.